Today, we are going to discuss one of the most iconic artifacts from one of the most popular movies in American history. Upon the unfortunate demise of the Wicked Witch of the East, Dorothy Gale had the good fortune of receiving her ruby red slippers. There's no place like Quick Curator to learn about these magical artifacts, so we're off to see the wizard. In 1939, the MGM film Wizard of Oz came out, based off of L. Frank Baum's books. In the books, Dorothy had silver slippers, but one of the screenplay writers, Noel Langley, decided that they should be ruby red. They made this change because the movie was going to be utilizing the new technology, Technicolor. They wanted these slippers to stand out against the yellow brick road. MGM's chief costume designer, Gilbert Adrian, was put in charge of making the shoes. He had two prototype styles, one of them being the Arabian test shoe, which looked more like something you would see on an elf with a curled up toe. The second style was known as the Bugle Beats shoe, and that was the style that they ultimately went with. The only changes made to this style was the fact that they used sequins instead of bugle beads, and a bow was added as a finishing touch. There were as many as 10 pairs made for this movie, but there are only 4 currently accounted for. After filming, the shoes were put in a warehouse and they were not rediscovered until 1970 by Kent Warner when he was preparing for an MGM auction. 3 out of the 4 pairs that Warner found had orange felt on the soles to minimize sound as Dorothy danced down the yellow brick road. Warner kept the pair without felt for himself. These shoes are also known as the witch's slippers because in the movie you can see the bottom of the shoes as the witch wears them and they don't have felt. The shoes that Warner kept also have circular patterns of wear on the bottom, which might mean that those were the shoes Dorothy wore as she clicked her heels to go home. Eventually, these shoes were purchased by Leonardo DiCaprio and Steven Spielberg for the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences in 2012. We don't know for sure how much was actually paid, but it is thought that it was around $3 million. Another pair of shoes that Kent Warner found are a size 6 compared to the rest, which are all size 5. That means those were Bobby Cachet's shoes, who was Judy Garland's stunt double. These shoes were purchased at auction in 2000 by David Eckleby for $666,000. The next pair, Warner sold to Michael Shaw back in 1970. Those shoes resided in the Judy Garland Museum in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. But they were stolen in 2005 and have yet to be found. The 4th pair of shoes were bought at the MGM auction for $15,000. And then, in 1979, they were anonymously donated to the Smithsonian Institution. The shoes went into an exhibit called 1939 in the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History. In late 2012, the Smithsonian loaned out the shoes for 6 weeks to the Victoria and Albert Museum in London for the Hollywood costume exhibit. This was the first time the slippers got to go to Europe, and it was the first time the shoes got to reunite with the blue and white gingham dress. The shoes are now back in the National Museum of American History in the exhibit called American Stories. The American Stories exhibit houses many artifacts that have shaped American culture, identity, and history. There's no place like home for Dorothy, and for you and me, there's no place like a museum. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you next week. Bye!